So I'm going to start by talking about one of our clients that came to legal aid. She was a young woman who had an infant, 6 months old. She was looking to rent a place. She found a place that was for rent and decided to check it out. She actually toured it while holding her baby, and she liked it. Wood floors, fireplace, cute bathroom. The price was right, so she said, "I'll take it." A couple months after moving in, she gets a notice from the Ohio Department of Health, and it says that there had been a lead risk assessment investigation that was conducted in 2007, and that there had been lead hazards that were found. They conducted a new test in 2018, and this notice showed that basically there was lead dust on almost all of the surfaces in the house. She knew that this was a problem for her child, who was very young and on the ground all the time, trying to learn to crawl, and so she contacted legal aid. Shanae's story is not unique, as we're learning today. The problem of lead in Cleveland is huge. There's an estimated 10,000 children that have been poisoned in the last 5 years. While there are many sources of lead, the most common one that children are poisoned by is lead dust. This dust is created when lead paint wears and it settles on the surfaces. Oops, not quite yet. Cleveland's rental stock is old. There's about 84,000 rentals, and most of it is pre-1978. So where there's an old house, there's likely to be lead paint. And as widely and thoroughly reported by Rachel and Bree in the Toxic Neglect series, the laws that address lead poisoning are reactive. They are not preventative. And so, as we've said, as my panelists here, my panelist partners have said, we are using children as lead detectors. And Cleveland, for a long time, had really failed to address the lead poisoning cases that were coming across its desk. So there was hundreds, thousands of a backlog of uninvestigated lead cases. So this is a picture of one of my daughters. And just to remind folks, we're talking about development of the body when children are most susceptible for really long-term severe damage. The brain is the most at risk, but we're also talking about really almost every body part. Liver, kidneys, it's stored in the bones and the teeth, it's stored in the endocrine system, and it doesn't go away. We talk a lot about how children are poisoned, and we hear about paint chips and kids chewing on paint chips. This doesn't really happen that much. It's really lead dust that is poisoning our kids when they're doing things that are developmentally appropriate. The lead paint is worn away and the dust settles on surfaces, and kids do things that they are going to do, like they pull themselves up on windowsills that have a little bit of lead dust on them, and they put their hands in their mouth, and that leads to their poisoning. Or they just simply crawl around on the ground, and lead dust that has settled in the carpet gets on their hands, and again they put their hands in their mouth, and they're poisoned. You can't see lead dust, and so people don't even know that it's happening to their children. So when the Flint, Michigan crisis occurred, and there started being a lot of attention in Cleveland, at Legal Aid we looked internally and said, well, what's our role in this problem? And we decided on a two-prong approach: one, looking to enforce current laws, and two, to create new laws. So looking at the first prong of enforcing current laws, we came at it from a defensive posture with evictions. A lot of times when people complain to their landlords that there's lead hazards, their landlord turns around and gives them an eviction notice. So we counterclaim in those cases, and we seek damages for the conditions, and we also seek motions for a prohibition to re-rent that unit until it has been remediated. And we're developing those strategies. We've also tried some affirmative approaches. The biggest case that we've had is this case where we sued the city with the lead abatement, and they're using the lead abatement law. And we're looking to file some rent deposit cases where a tenant knows that they have a lead hazard because maybe they've gotten placarded and they paid their rent and they're timely and their landlord is not doing anything and they want to know what they can do. We'd like to rent deposit that rent, get each month that builds as they pay, as the rent collects, and use that money to either remediate the house so they know that the house that they're living in is lead safe, or use it to find a new place to live. These are maps that are identifying hotspots. It's a hotspot analysis. So each dot on the map on the left is representing one of more than 6,400 children whose addresses could be mapped by Kerwin that have a blood lead level in excess of 5 micrograms per deciliter. Each dot represents a single test for one child. So many children have been tested multiple times. They took the test with the highest level, and that's how they mapped it in order to not have duplicates. And it's a conservative approach, but they also point out why it's difficult to assess how many children have been poisoned because of all the different sources of that information. So they create hotspots to identify clusters of children with high blood lead levels. The technique takes into account both the physical density of the dots, the cluster of them together, and the magnitude of the blood lead level, so that the clusters actually reflect where most children have the highest blood lead levels that have been tested. These clusters are statistically significant because they reflect real case clustering and not just chance groupings of poisoned children. And so you can see the hot spots where the red, which is the highest concentration of children with high blood lead levels, overlaid in the environmental justice regions on the map on the right, and you can see where they fall. So going back to Shanae, what happened to her? It was actually based on two different cases. In the first case, the child was poisoned. The child was 10 years old, so the state lead abatement law did not get triggered. The eviction was dismissed. The rent was waived. It was $5,100. Our family moved, and through the course of litigation, we filed a motion to prohibit re-rental, and that survived, even though the parties actually both dismissed their cases. The court basically said they couldn't ignore the fact that they knew that there were lead hazards, and so they sent their own inspectors and then ordered the house to not be re-rented until it was remediated. In the other case, this was the case with the actual baby. The landlord did know that there had been lead hazards. The mom did not let her baby crawl around on the floor because she was afraid of poisoning. The family eventually moved. It took a little bit of time. So far, we don't think the child was poisoned, but was not really crawling by the age of 1, which is developmentally troublesome. And so we're still sort of looking into what to do with that case. So we're just trying to keep the pressure on because we firmly believe that the homes in which our children reside should not poison them.